Khan, on the threshold of his 18th year, was no longer a person, but a living relic of the nightmare forged by his mother, Darla. The tall-ceilinged stone house, heavy with the stench of damp and rusty iron in every corner, was not a sanctuary for Khan, but a graveyard where his soul was slowly decaying. Darla, his mother, yet also his warden, his executioner. Darla was no ordinary witch. She was a woman who had descended to the deepest levels of power, sealed herself with the ancient will itself, yet she was arrogant and ambitious enough to create a crack in that very seal. Khan was the sole tangible evidence of Darla's one great mistake, and thus her eternal penance. In her youth, Darla had made a pact with the most ravenous and envious hierarchy of the underworld, the mouthless emissaries to attain limitless knowledge and power. These entities were not primarily tasked with serving the master directly, but with harvesting the souls on the path leading to him. When Darla made this pact, she was unsatisfied with the power granted to her, and so she added that insolent, cursed note in her own handwriting to the end of the agreement. Those who serve me cannot be beings lower than my own shadow. Their power must be less than mine, and their loyalty undisputed. Otherwise, a sacrifice will be offered in their stead. This was not a simple clause, but a challenge. The mouthless emissaries perceived Darla's arrogance as an insult to the master, and they determined that the sacrifice Darla would offer must be the most precious, the most innocent, her son, Khan. The nightmare began when Khan was 8, during one of Darla's grand rituals, when every candle in the house suddenly darkened and the room was enveloped by the first cold wave of the haunting. At first, they were flimsy shadows, stolen from light and air, gathering around Khan's bed, whispering his name. The whispers were initially just a humming, but over time they became clear, repeating his childhood fears, his loneliness, the shamas he experienced at school. It was as if the entities were not only inflicting physical torment, but also tearing down all the defense mechanisms in Khan's mind, piece by piece, to consume his soul. Khan's room was a cold zone. Even in the middle of summer, his windowless room was icy, and when he lay in bed, the weight that settled on his chest made it impossible to breathe. When he opened his eyes, he would see the translucent, cold fingerprints left on the window glass, tracing a pattern that mocked Khan's own face. By the time he turned 14, the torment had shifted from psychological to physical. The mirrors no longer only showed dark eyes. When Khan looked into them, he would see bruises on his own reflection's neck and deep claw marks on his arms, yet his skin felt smoothed to the touch. Darla turned a blind eye to these happenings, sometimes even smiling mockingly at Khan's invisible wounds. Darla had begun to view Khan's slow consumption by these entities as the atonement for her own mistake. During this time, she clung tighter to her rituals, performing new rites in the basement, where the air was thick with sulfur and the smell of blood. Khan realized that his mother had not only offered him as a sacrifice, but had left him as their plaything, thereby postponing her own punishment. The most excruciating torment occurred in his sleep. Every night, Khan had the same dream, running down a long, dark corridor, yet his legs wouldn't move. At the end of the corridor, his mother, Darla, stood with her back turned, wearing a black robe. As Khan called out to her, Darla would slowly turn, but her face would not be Darla's, but that of a pallid, chalk-white entity with deep, sunken eyes. That entity would approach Cain every time and whisper, Your mother stole what belonged to us. Now we are stealing what belongs to her, your time. These dreams left Khan so exhausted that he sometimes had to stay awake for days. To sleep was simply to give more psychic energy to the entities. When he reached 18, Darla's demeanor suddenly changed. She was no longer merely cold and indifferent, but also hasty and anxious. The rituals in the basement continued day and night. The scent of sulfur and blood in the house had become so intense that Khan could no longer even imagine normal air. One day, he caught Darla's whispers echoing through the air vents. Darla was pleading with the mouthless emissaries. "I promise, I will deliver him to you before the pact's duration expires. Just grant me a little more time." The agreement had a term limit, and that limit was fast approaching. Darla's penance was nearly over, and the final sacrifice, Khan, had to be offered. Khan knew that if he wanted to survive that night, he had to unravel the secret of the house. Darla always carried a carved wooden box pressed against her chest. Khan was sure that box contained all of Darla's pacts and ritual notes. He waited for the moment when Darla focused all her energy on preparing for her final and greatest ceremony in the basement. The door wasn't locked. Darla was so confident she believed Khan had no strength left to resist, but Darla was wrong. Years of torture had not broken Khan, but hardened his spirit like steel. Khan slipped into his mother's bedroom. Every corner of the room was filled with protective sigils and sachets of dried herbs. The box lay in a hidden compartment beneath the bed. When Khan opened the box, he found not only parchment but also a journal, records of the entities meticulously kept in Darla's own hand. With a trembling hand, Khan opened the journal. Darla had detailed how she had scorned the emissaries, how she had insulted them, and how they, in turn, considered it their right to slowly consume Khan's soul as punishment. On one of the pages there was a note, written with a sense of relief as if a massive burden had been lifted from Darla's shoulders. The atonement will finally cease on his, Khan's, 18th birthday. The emissaries will accept him, and I shall be free. Darla's biggest mistake was not just being arrogant. It was forgetting what the mouthless emissaries valued most. They valued not power, but chaos and the breaking of balance. Towards the end of the journal, Khan discovered a reverse sigil that Darla had used to urgently recall the emissaries, but which also possessed the power to uncontrollably break their chains if activated improperly. This sigil would completely nullify Darla's protective shield, redirecting the entities straight towards their creator. Khan had no second to spare. Darla's screams in an unintelligible language had begun to echo from the basement. The ritual had reached its climax. Khan realized that Darla had opened a gate to summon him. He quickly grabbed the records of the entity's journal and all the parchments he could find and headed to the main hall of the house. In the middle of the hall, he spread the ashes and embers left from Darla's ceremonies. He cut his fingertip and used his blood to draw the reverse sigil right in the center of all Darla's protective boundaries, making it almost invisible. This sigil would redirect the entity's attention from Khan, the victim, to Darla, who had lost control of them. As the sigil was completed, the walls of the house began to creak. The scent of sulfur was so intense that Khan struggled to breathe. The iron door of the basement suddenly burst open, as if kicked from the inside, and Darla, her face smeared with blood, her eyes wide with terror, sprinted up the stairs. Trailing behind her were over a dozen mouthless emissaries, floating in the air, sucking the light around them and letting out sharp, metallic shrieks. Darla saw Khan, and the terror on her face turned into an instant fury. "What have you done, traitor?" she screamed. But her words were lost amidst the entity's piercing cries. The entities were not aiming for Darla, but for the vibration of uncontrollable chaos emanating from the sigil Khan had drawn. The sigil had completely shattered all of Darla's protective barriers. The emissaries targeted Darla herself. Just as Darla had scorned them with her arrogance, they now wanted her soul with the same appetite. Darla's face contorted into a horrific mask in less than a second. Her screams turned into a ringing in her throat, for the mouthless emissaries were ripping out her mouth, her voice and her breath just as their name implied. Khan, his back against the wall, watched this final ritual without even blinking as Darla's lifeless body was crushed beneath the entities. The emissaries, satisfied with the chaos created by the sigil, quickly consumed Darla's soul and body, then slowly drifted toward the ashes in the center of the hall, melting into the air until they vanished. The curse was over. The silence was deafening. Khan had brought an end to an 18-year nightmare, but the price was steep. He had lost his childhood, his youth, and his innocence. The next morning, the first rays of the sun shone upon Darla's now skeletal remains. Khan left the house, taking his mother's records of the entity's journal, the only tangible proof of this dark memory. He was free, but he was not the only one who escaped that house. Darla's arrogance and the breath of the mouthless emissaries had seeped into Khan's soul. Everywhere he went, Khan would smell the sulfur, and in every minor shadow, he would search for the marks of those cold, translucent fingers. He was now Deep Night, the sole bearer of a cursed legacy, the protagonist of an endless insomnia and an unending war against his own shadows. This was not the end of his life. This was the gate opening to the endless nightmare of the real world after 18 years of torture, and through that gate he stepped as a bloody and weary adult. This is where our story concludes. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and give the videos a thumbs up so you don't miss out on future tailies. Take care, everyone. See you soon.